Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? Welcome back to For Strategy Gaming. Going to be taking a look at a Terran strategy today. We're going to be looking at the 2 racks opening versus a Zerg player, and then following that up, that early Marine pressure with some Infernal Pregnator Hellions, and obviously transitioning into an expansion as well. The 2 racks opener is pretty much always going to be followed up with a quick expo as well. That's the whole point of it. You apply early Marine pressure, you try to stop or delay the expansion for the Zerg player, and then you roll into an expansion of your own. So we're going to be looking at the beginning build order. Realize we're going to be attaching numbers to things, but these aren't going to be static. As I mentioned in the disclaimer below in the video description, the build orders and things are subject to change based on what your opponent's doing, everything like that, but I don't need to explain that because you guys understand it pretty much by now. So anyways, this is going to be coming from a game that I recently did cast. This was in a series between QXC and Jack. So obviously Jack is the Zerg opponent here, so we're going to be seeing the opening build order. Let me run over that very quickly here. Starting off with that 10 depot, and then at 12 supply you get your first racks. You cut production of SCVs, and then you get your second racks at 12 supply again. The Orbital Command is going to come at 14 supply, and then that second depot coming at 16 supply. So basically what's going to happen at this point, I'm going to slow it on down. You're going to want to push out with your early, with your SCVs. You're going to want to move out with the SCVs. 2 SCVs is kind of ideal, and then just continuously pump out Marines. Now what's going to happen here is we're going to see what we're doing here. The whole goal that QXC is going to be trying to do is he wants to get down a couple bunkers, and he wants to try to keep them up so that he can deny the expansion. That's the entire point of this tactic. Again, denying and hurting the economy of the Zerg player. One thing you want to make sure you do is not ever get surrounded. Always go with that move shoot. If you're not quite sure how to do that, that is literally just clicking your Marine in a direction away from the melee units that are chasing you and then hitting S. So you go back S, back S. That's the entire point. Now we're going to see here Jack does precisely what he needs to and stops these bunkers from coming up, but that does not mean in any sense or fashion that this is the end of the push. If you do happen to get your bunkers delayed, you still want to continue up this Marine aggression because it's going to be very, very effective. I mentioned specifically here, before we go too much further, you're just keeping this up. We're going to keep up constant production of Marines. You can see QXC streaming them right to his opponent's base. The whole point is you keep this up, and then once you hit that 400 extra minerals, then you start building your expansion, and then we start to tech up from here. So that's exactly what you're going to see. QXC is going to non-stop be making these Marines. He's going to continue to apply this pressure. You may ask, okay, in an ideal situation, we would have got those bunkers up, and that would have pretty much surefire made it so that the Zerg player loses his expo, especially on a map like this with that ramp right there. You can put the bunkers hugging right next to each other, and it makes it very hard for the Zerg player to get a full surround on those while you're building them. But again, as you saw, Jack was able to actually fend off that initial bunker placement, but that doesn't mean that all is lost. You can see right now still keeping up the Marine production, just now coming down with that command center, like I mentioned, just making sure you're constantly producing, and then whenever you get those extra 400 resources, that's when you're going to be coming up with that command center. So why are we keeping up this Marine production? Well, the truth is that early game Marines are incredibly effective against Zerglings. They're just so very strong. I mean, overall Marines are obviously effective against Zerglings, especially later game with Stimpack and Combat Shield. But you can really abuse this early game. If your Zerg opponent doesn't get roaches, Marines are going to do a lot of damage. You can see again that Marine production is keeping up. He does have it rallied, so he's going to be bringing those Marines into the equation at some point. The main thing to focus on and what we're going to be doing here is trying to, again, delay the expansion and hurt the economy. So if there were drones down here, we'd be focusing those. Now that there are no drones, we obviously get rid of those threats first in the Zerglings, but then going to be going straight for that hatchery. If you can actually take out that hatchery, that's going to put you in a tremendous position. Taking a look back in QXC's base, you can see starting to work in that transition. Got 2 refineries right now. The transition here from this early Marine pressure is going to be Infernal Pregnator Hellions. Given the fact that with this early Marine pressure, you will hopefully have done a lot of economic damage and set them back. If you can then roll in with Infernal Pregnator Hellions, you're going to be absolutely roasting his drone line, and that's going to be a really good situation for you, most definitely. So you can see again, microing back the whole method, the whole point of this. We took a look at that Like a Boss video. If you haven't seen it on the channel, it's going to be the move shoot command, and that's exactly what you want to do to stay away from melee attackers. Just click back and S, back and S. That's the entire point you're going to see him do here is just clicking his guys back, hitting S, clicking him back, hitting S, and whenever he hits that S command for stop, that's going to target fire the nearest enemy units. But again, just keeping this up, keeping up this harassment, and at the same time trying to macro back at home. Again, doing that move stop command. So as you can see, just with all the harassment so far that QXC's done in this game, these Marines, like I mentioned, so very effective against Zerg early game, unless there are, of course, roaches on the board. Take a look back in the base really quick for QXC. Going to pause it momentarily. So here's that transition like I talked about. We saw those double refineries get up, and in terms of timing, in this particular game, I realize that these exact numbers may change, but in this particular game, I talked about how we opened up with the 10 depot, 12 racks, 14 orbital command, and then a 16 depot as well. Then a 27 supply, that's when this command center started building, and as you saw, QXC just kept up that marine production nonstop until he had those extra 400, and that happened to be at 27 supply, so that's when he dropped his expo. 34 supply was the second racks. Now 34 supply also, that's when these double refineries came up, and then the double factories, first at 39, then this one came at 38 as well. You may say, why was it a lower number? Well, just because he lost Marines, and that's again why going for these strict number counts aren't really the best of things. But the important thing to know is that just constantly producing those Marines early game, applying that pressure, the command center for the expansion as soon as you can afford it, and then rolling up into those refineries as soon as you can afford it, and then once you have the Vespian, of course, getting down these factories. The next spot from here, we're going to be putting a tech lab on this factory to go for that Infernal Preigniter. Also going to be a tech lab on one of the barracks as well to start researching Stimpak, but all the while trying to maintain this harassment, and again, look at how effective these Marines are with some simple move shoot commands, stopping that full surround. That's the most important thing, and that's the reason we want to do it. You just want to stop that surround. If you get surrounded, then your Marines are going to drop quickly, but if you can keep pulling them back, then they're going to be in a much better position. And if you can do something like we saw QXC do here and taking out the Expo, you're pretty much guaranteed to win at that point. You will just be so your opponent will do. So after doing severe damage, even if you can't snipe the hatchery, that's quite fine. If you do enough damage, if you delay the Expo long enough, that's fine. Once you feel like the attack is no longer going to be effective, that's when you're going to pull back and continue to work for the next transition. You can see right now QXC moving over the Orbital Command 2 is a natural. Now you may ask initially, why did he have the Orbital Command in his main base just pumping out SCVs? You actually see a lot of Terran players do this. They'll build the expansion in their base, they'll change it to an Orbital Command, and then they'll just start saturating their main pretty heavily. And what's going to happen is as soon as that main's nice and saturated and you feel safe to expand, then you go ahead and just lift off, drop the expansion, and then just transfer over the workers. Simple as that, not a problem. Here's that next step that I talked about. Once those refineries are up and saturated, as soon as you have the extra Vespian, you're getting these tech labs, one on the barracks, one on the factory. Start researching that Infernal Preigniter, start pumping out a ton of Hellions, and start researching that Stimpak. Also going to get a couple reactors on these barracks here for that continuous Marine production post this part. So what's going to happen here is we're going to see QXC push out with these Marines Hellions. This is going to be a win right here simply because of the fact that he did snipe the Expo. But what I want to mention is even if you don't kill the Expo, you're going to want to use those Infernal Preigniter Hellions, try to sneak up into the main and try to hit that natural that was likely to get replaced and just work on those drone counts. Again, the whole goal is to try to consistently hurt the Zerg player's economy. Now let's talk about transitions from here. QXC is again going to push up, and there's not going to be a whole lot of resistance from Jack just because he was so crippled from that early game harass. But transitions from this point, what you're likely to see is moving into some tanks. You can see obviously Mass Marines is going to be a focus with these 3 barracks with reactors on there. But after this Infernal Preigniter push, if this didn't happen to actually win the game, which it did in this particular example, you can see Jack just quits here. So again, the main focus would have been just going for that econ, trying to roast those drones. But if you didn't win the game here, the likely next transition is going to be working up into tanks. And look at that, actually. QXC had a tank queued up. So you would have worked up into tanks, gotten some siege mode, and then just a basic Marine tank composition is very strong. Throwing in a couple Marauders in there as well to deal with any possible roaches, sniping down things like Infestors. That's going to be effective. Tanks, and then getting Vikings in case you expect Brewlords to come into play. And that's going to be a nice, healthy mix against a Zerg opponent. So as you saw, guys, we took a look at that 2 racks early pressure. I just tried to talk on a few key points in the game. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me just run over that build order one more time. As I disclaimed earlier, these are going to be subject to change based on what goes on, but this is just to give you a general idea of how it could look. Starting off, opening build's going to be pretty much set in stone with that 10 depot, 2 racks, a 12 supply, and then a 14 supply, that Orbital Command, and then the second depot coming at 16. Now, again, we continued up constant Marine production pumping out into the Expo of the Zerg player, and then as soon as the QXC had those extra 400, he dropped that command center inside of his main base, and that was at 27 supply. Then a 34 supply, he saw a 3rd racks, and that was essentially while keeping up Marine production once he had those extra resources. That's when the 3rd racks came out. 34 supply also also those double refineries, got those nice and saturated. As soon as he had the extra Vespian, getting double factories there. Once those were up, as soon as he had the extra Vespian, getting tech labs, one on a barracks, one on a factory, going for that infernal pre-igniter, also going for that stim pack, pumping out Hellions, so to follow up that initial marine pressure with a marine Hellion attack. And again, even if you don't snipe that expo, that Hellion follow-up is going to be very strong. Just remember to focus on that economy, try to kill as many workers as possible. That's going to be your main goal. And then had this not won the game, the next step would have been rolling into tanks, getting siege mode, keep up marine production, throw some marauders in there as well, and then just continue up your game plan from there. So that about does it, guys. Again, hopefully you enjoyed this strategy video. As always, if you like the commentary, if you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Keep